So I'd like to start by first thanking the University of Chicago for this gracious invitation. Any chance to leave snowy Boston, and it was snowy when I left yesterday, for this view is pretty much a good deal for me. So thank you so much for the invitation. And thank you to all of you for taking a day to really commit yourself to talking more about global education and why this is important and how to be bringing this to students. It's one of the most critically important things we can do as educators is not only to talk about how to educate kids for the future, but also to get together with each other. This is a very important way to be sharing ideas and generating what the future of education should look like. So you coming together for these professional days is really a critical piece of global education. So I wanted to start by telling you a story. A few months back, I had what I would call a driveway moment. I'm sure you've probably had one of these moments. These are these moments where you're listening to an NPR story and you're so hooked on whatever it is that they're talking about that you can't possibly step out of your car. You quite literally hang out in the driveway until it's over because you want to know what the rest of the story is. But like you, I'm a teacher, so this is probably not my driveway. This is a little bit more like my driveway, probably. My driveway moment was listening to a story about the state of Utah. So you probably didn't think I was going to say that, but the state of Utah kept me in my car. I think you would have been struck by this story too had you been there. It was about the Silicon Slopes of Utah. Apparently, at the time of this story, earlier this spring, Utah was creating more jobs than any other state in our country after North Dakota. And the job market that was booming there was being driven by technology companies. Utah is trying to replicate the Silicon Valley model, bringing entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and providing a backdrop of great skiing and a lifestyle that nobody would want to pass up. And it's a great combo to attract the best talent that's out there. And I think at that point I was expecting the NPR reporter to talk about how they were outsourcing jobs to keep their costs low or grow their businesses in creative ways, which caused me to recall a quote by Steve Jobs, where he was talking to President Obama about the fact that millions of his iProducts were being made overseas. And when he was asked by the president if those jobs in any way could come back to the United States, Steve Jobs simply said, "Those jobs are not coming back." So you fast forward back to my driveway moment, where I was wondering, how is it that Utah is able to bring jobs back to the United States? What was the magic bullet? And why were companies going to Utah when literally they could go anywhere in the world for the best talent out there? Geography is no longer a limitation for companies, and talent exists in every corner of the world. So why was it Utah? You're wondering, right? You're in the driveway, right? You're with me. So apparently they have a secret weapon, which is foreign languages and global knowledge. Companies like eBay have decided to move call center jobs back to the United States and to Utah from overseas. Why? Is because Utah has the highest percentage of foreign language speakers of any state in our country. Thousands of Mormon missionaries spend 2 years abroad, not only learning a new language, but immersing themselves in a new culture, learning new traditions, and learning the intricacies of a different cultural perspective. These skills become invaluable to a company like eBay, whose customers and sellers hail from all over the world. Every interaction is an exercise in global diplomacy, and those 21st century skills of global awareness, critical thinking, cross-cultural communication, collaboration, and language are what set those individuals apart and make them successful for the world that we are now in. Learning about the world used to be a luxury. It used to be something you would read about in the newspaper on the weekends with your coffee when you had some time on your hands. But it didn't really seem to have a direct impact on our day-to-day lives. The world existed on the periphery of our day-to-day, and the center of our world was our town, our state, our country. Wherever you found yourself was what was important to your day-to-day existence. Today, that world has dramatically changed. There is no doubt. Even if you never leave your town, your daily activities are truly global in nature. Whether you're talking with a call center employee in Utah or in India, you're purchasing an item online that will be mailed to you from London, or you're working with a student whose family just migrated from China, you, your families, your students are now intimately connected to the world in a way they never have been before. Global events are now at the center of our daily lives and no longer live on the periphery. I'd like to argue that although schools have made pretty significant strides in the realm of global education and global learning and teaching, global content and skills still live on the periphery in the field of education. By the end of this talk, I hope to motivate you to do your part to start moving it to the center. If we all agree that the role of education is to prepare students for the world, our future world, not the one we know now, then how we do this must involve careful thought, creative teaching, and a commitment to global education on the part of everyone. It involves moving out of our comfort zone and into what may be the unknown. And quite frankly, it involves some work, which is why I'm glad you're here today. I run an education nonprofit outside of Boston called Primary Source. We work with teachers and administrators from around the country to educate them about the world. Although we've worked with people in a variety of contexts, one thing is consistently true across all schools. Teachers are uncertain about how much time it will take to truly make their teaching global. And that makes it both intimidating and a little bit stressful. It feels like an add-on, a new direction, an initiative du jour, something that your district says you need to start worrying about. But it might change next year, so you're not quite sure how much time you should devote to it. But all of us know deep down inside that the world is not only getting smaller, but that globalizing our teaching is no longer an option. It's something we have to do. We're preparing students for jobs that don't even exist yet, a future we can't even know. And that's a really hard thing to do when you don't have models for what best practice looks like. We're preparing students for communities that we've never visited, places we've never seen, interactions we may not have had ourselves, and that, quite frankly, is a little scary. Combine this with the fact that most states in our country have now adopted the Common Core state standards and are faced with the challenge of not only understanding them, but finding resources, activities, and assignments that align with them. From a global education perspective, I like to think that the Common Core is a real opportunity and a pretty great invitation for teachers. If you've had time to spend with the document, you know that it's fairly clear about what students need to be able to do by the time that they graduate. And it gives us space for the teacher to direct that learning and select which informational texts or materials to use in order for students to develop the skills to be college and career ready. We know that some of the most important skills for this kind of readiness are deep global awareness and the ability to think from multiple perspectives. These are also the goals of the Common Core. So why not select materials from anywhere in the world? If you look at the Common Core, they give you examples of texts you could use in your curriculum. But interestingly enough, they're very Americentric and Eurocentric. They're not good examples of global texts to use. But that doesn't mean that you're stuck with them. That means you can do whatever you want to pull in the kinds of texts that you want to bring the world to your students. It's an open door, but it's your responsibility to walk through that door. And it means that it's in your court to create those learning opportunities for kids. The Common Core, unfortunately, does not do it for you, but it provides you the opportunity and the venue in which to bring global perspectives to students. For many of us, learning about the world and teaching about world cultures has lived in the realm of clubs. Maybe you have an international club, right? Who has that? Everyone, probably. An international club. You might hold an international day full of food, music, and traditions. You may have flags from different countries in your hallways or world clocks that indicate the time in different time zones around the world. If you teach about global issues in your courses, you may treat it at the start or at the end of your class as a current events discussion, when students bring in news headlines as a warm-up or a cool-down exercise. If the world occupies a serious role in the curriculum, it may live exclusively with the world language teacher or the world history teacher, but it's not an integral part of all areas of study. This is what I call the comfort zone. It's a place where if you need to deal with the world, you can, but you don't have to go very deep because maybe you don't feel like you have enough knowledge to go deeper. Keeping global education on the periphery is a comfortable space. And it's usually because we may not have the vision for what integrated global education looks like. And so we treat the world in tangible chunks because we fear we may not know enough to really connect students with the world. And that's a legitimate fear. For many of us, we may not have had the opportunity to really dig into this content or study it ourselves. But I think one of the greatest challenges, and also one of the biggest and most invigorating opportunities for educators, is to help move global education from the periphery to the center, so that the school culture, the community, and everything that students are touching puts them in a position to investigate the world, analyze different perspectives, communicate ideas across cultural settings, and take action on issues of global significance. In the field of social studies, you're ideally suited to explore the world and ensure that students study all world events in a broader global context. You have reason to connect with global peers and build real-world learning with your global colleagues. You can create opportunities to collaborate with other subject areas and ensure that global education is fluidly integrated across the curriculum. It's not a luxury, it's not an add-on, it's not a new initiative, but meaningful core content in everything that you do with kids. The Common Core literacy standards are now requiring teachers to think in an interdisciplinary way about their work. So if that's a space where you hadn't spent a lot of time before, you're now being prompted to teach literacy skills across the curriculum. That's your invitation to bring in global content. Team up with your colleagues and start to do it together, because we're now being prompted to do that by the Common Core. During this talk today, I hope to help you assess where your school is in preparing kids for the world, to be proficient learners and global citizens. I'll also offer up 10 very concrete ways that you can start moving global education from the periphery to the center. So my hope is that you leave today with at least one thing that you can start to do on Monday to really start to move the conversation forward in your communities. I realize that all of you are coming from very different contexts, from my understanding. So my hope is that you find where you are along this continuum and just move one step forward. That would be a huge success and I think a great use of your day. I'd love to have a better sense, though, of where people are in the room. So what I'd like to do is a cell phone poll. Has anyone used Poll Everywhere before? Some of you? So some of you are a little familiar. If you're not, and you're game for using your cell phone or your iPad or your laptop or whatever you have, go ahead and take it out. And by the way, I'm using the free version of Poll Everywhere, which is what most teachers use. And what that means is we're limited to 40 people that can actually respond to this poll. I tell you this only because if you'd like to just kind of look on with a friend, that would be great. Or if you don't have unlimited text messaging, that would also be a good thing so you don't spend your texts. But feel free to look on with a friend and just hang tight and I will tell you what you need to do. All right, so all you need is to open up your text messaging area as if you were going to text a friend, which you're not going to do, right? I like to start with a warm-up question that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. It was mentioned in my introduction that I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Moldova. First of all, does anyone know where that is? Yeah, we have some yeses. That's good. You were one step ahead of me when I was assigned to this country to live for 2 years. I didn't know where it was. So, where's our Eastern European Studies guru? There you are. You know where it is. You're all over that. So, my challenge to you to get warmed up is to tell me what the capital of Moldova is. So, what you're going to need to do is you'll see at the top, it says text a code to 37607. Do you see that? Right here. That's the person that you're going to be texting to. So imagine that you were texting to this person's phone number. And in the message that you text, you're going to type in whatever you think your answer is. Okay? So you're sending a text to 37607. And in the text area, hey, some of you guys are getting it. You're going to put in this number saying, this is what I believe it is. So if you think it's Kiev, you're going to go ahead and type in that number. And as soon as you type it in, this is going to slowly show you what the responses in the room are. So we'll kind of get a sense of where people are at. Don't be swayed by what people have on the screen either. Think for yourself, people. Come on. Only have 19 people so far. Keep going. Welcome. If you're struggling, lean over and ask a friend. See if you can figure it out. Has anyone been to Chisinau? That would be a first. Okay, so no. Good. So those of you who picked Chisinau, you're correct. That is the capital of Moldova. So good work. It's the middle one. Chisinau. If you're a Russian speaker, you say Kishinev. I'm a Romanian speaker, so it's Chisinau. So, okay, so now goal number 1 achieved. Everyone in the room knows something about Moldova, which is sort of my mission in life besides global education, is that everyone learns something about Moldova. So good, done. And now you know they speak Romanian and Russian in Moldova. So let's move on to the serious stuff here. So now you're warmed up, you know how to use Poll Everywhere. Let's try another one. So my question is, does your school situate global education on the periphery or in the center of the curriculum or school culture? Give yourself an honest assessment of your community. So again, you're texting to 37607, and you pick your answer. And if you're not sure because you're still getting warmed up or you haven't had your coffee yet, that's okay too. Some strong periphery representation. Excellent. Any other takers? Oh, yep. As predicted. That's good. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to move it so you're feeling like you're more in the center by the end of the day. The people who are located in the center, make sure you share your best practices today. People who feel like they're doing it well, don't be shy of what you guys are doing in your schools or districts. Okay, so as predicted, about 3/4 of the room feel like global education is probably still in the realm of clubs or international days or flags and festivals, right? Which is not a bad thing, but it is something I want to raise your awareness to, because that's not enough. So our goal today is to figure out how you move beyond it. All right, so let's try the next one. The next question is, does your school have a formal relationship with a school in another part of the world? Does your school have any kind of formal relationship with either a classroom or a teacher or another country in some way? Don't be overwhelmed. It's only 2 people so far. It's very dramatic when those first people put in their answers. I love those first 2 votes because it's like, what? Nobody has a relationship. But let's watch it trickle in here. You guys are getting much faster. Impressive. Okay, so it looks like a lot of you don't, which is fine. I'm basically foreshadowing some ideas that I'm going to be bringing your way. So, all right, and let's move to the last question. You got to be quick now. See, I'm moving the pace a little bit here. Okay, the last one is, do you currently have common planning time with your colleagues across subject areas? Meaning, do you get a chance to collaborate with people in other departments during a common planning time, or no? Get ready for the drama of the first vote. I love it. Who's it going to be? What? No, no one has it. Oh, we have a few yeses. That's great. Okay, your answers to these questions are giving me a little bit of a better sense of who's in the room, which is great. And by the way, so this is the free version of Poll Everywhere, so you can do up to 40 people. So it's usually good enough for a classroom if you decide to use this in the class. You can use cell phone, you can use iPad, you can use laptop. Kids can vote using a URL. You'll notice here on the right-hand side, some of you may be using this, but you can put your vote in at pollev.com. So there are different ways that students can vote if you decide to use something like this. All to say that, some districts are investing in voting technology that costs an awful lot of money. And so there are ways that you can quickly do this if you wanted to do it this way. It also allows for open-ended answers, so kids can actually write in answers. It doesn't just have to be multiple choice. So there are different ways to do it. But what I'm noticing, and I'm not quite surprised by, is the fact that most people are experiencing global education on the periphery. They may not already have opportunities to be working with other countries in any kind of authentic or meaningful way. And you probably are in a little bit of a silo in your department. So you might be working alone or with other colleagues in your department, but you may not have enough opportunity to really be working across the curriculum in an interdisciplinary way. So this leads to what I hope will be the more nitty-gritty practical part here, which is top 10 things that you can start to do now. So my guess is, of the people in the room, there might be some things in here that you've already heard of. My hope is that you find at least something that you've never heard of before that you can start to explore. And if this is all really new to you, you might find tons of things that you can start to do. So my hope is to move you, like I said before, one notch along the continuum. So you don't have to have everything right by Monday morning. But I would love to see you moving one step closer to moving global education to the core of what you do in your classroom, in your building, in your school, in your district, as much as you can. So the first thing is a really important step, and it might take being honest with yourself in a way that might be uncomfortable, but audit your own curriculum. Really take a critical eye to your own curriculum and ask yourself some important key questions. One, is what you're doing with your kids real and relevant? Is it real learning? Are there clear applications to the real world that you feel like you do with kids? Do they see what the purpose is of all of this? Do you have opportunities for them to connect with real people in other parts of the world? Are there opportunities for collaboration with people in different parts of the world? Are they working in a cross-cultural atmosphere? Are they given opportunity to exercise those skills? Are there opportunities to work with other departments in your curriculum at any point during the year? And do students have an opportunity to really look at things from different perspectives? That doesn't necessarily mean that they all have to be from different parts of the world, the global perspectives. But are kids pushed outside of a single story and really pushed to encourage critical thinking about what this might look like from a different perspective? If you ask yourself these questions and you really start to dig into it, you might see where are the strong parts of your curriculum, where you sort of feel like things are going pretty well and you feel proud of it. And you might see other places where you'd like to focus your energy on kind of integrating some new materials, maybe some new resources, maybe some film, some art, whatever you need to do to start bringing in different perspectives. Those of you who attended the conference last year, you may have had some exposure already to the Asia Society's Global Competence Matrix. If you have not seen this yet, so there's a link to this off of the resource guide, so don't worry, you don't need to write it all down. That is not what it's going to look like when you go there. So basically, it's a very clean matrix that talks about the sort of 4 core competencies that kids need to have in order to be globally proficient by the time that they graduate. It's not rocket science. And I say this because I bet there's a lot that you're already doing that gets kids thinking from different perspectives, analyzing global content, taking action on their learning, but you may or may not feel like your whole curriculum does that well. So the matrix is a nice tool for kind of stacking your curriculum up against some common outcomes that the Asia Society has identified with CCSSO as what kids need to know and be able to do by the time that they graduate from high school. It's just a tool, but I think taking a hard look at your curriculum and sort of being honest with yourself is the best start, right? Admit that there might be a problem. This is always like the first step, right? So that's kind of the first place I'd like to send you. Then, if you don't have common planning time, start getting it in the works. It is really hard to do anything creative in a silo. You all know it. You probably live it. 75% of you live it because you told me that just now. Common planning time is something that will open up the possibilities, especially around the Common Core. If all of a sudden we're now teaching literacy across the curriculum in ways that maybe you hadn't before, or you're being asked to teach with informational texts in a way that you hadn't before, working with teachers who have experience with that in their core content area is the best way to do it. So starting to petition for that now, or finding before school time or after school time when you can work together, whatever the limitations of your district are, you know best, but try to get that moving because it's very hard to do this alone. Another idea that's very concrete but very simple, most schools have summer reading lists or reading that you suggest to kids to read for fun in their free time because every kid has a ton of free time, right? We at Primary Source have put together every summer a list of global reading suggestions. This could be something that you do and suggest to kids in the summer with their families, encourage families to read along with kids. Or if you're an English teacher or language arts, start to think about how you might incorporate some new titles into your curriculum. If you're looking for fresh ideas, new ways to bring it in, if you follow this link, it's going to take you to very similar format to what I showed you before. So there are tabs across the top. We have suggestions for kindergarten through 3rd grade, 4th and 5th grades, middle school and high school, that are globally arranged. Or dealing with different global issues that might be critical for students to be thinking about. So if you're a parent and you'd like to start talking with your kids about the world, these are just some suggestions to get you going. So at the very least, you might say, okay, I've always taught Things Fall Apart, which seems to be the book that gets on the list when you want to teach about Africa. It's like the one book that gets on the list. We're going to push you beyond Things Fall Apart. It's a wonderful piece of literature, by the way. I love it. I see some nods in the room, right? You teach Things Fall Apart? No? Oh, you've read it. Okay. So that seems to be the go-to. But how can you move even further? How can you bring in multiple perspectives and not just one? Africa, huge continent, right? So bringing in one book, probably not quite enough to start really digging into multiple perspectives on whatever the themes might be that you're dealing with. So we offer some ideas. The next is to just poll your faculty. Oftentimes our faculty is the biggest global resource we have. When you start talking to people, you might all of a sudden realize that Jamie's taken students every year when she was a teacher to go to a different country abroad, right? I didn't know that. I just learned that this morning. Jamie all of a sudden is a great resource. You just took an amazing trip to Nicaragua. I didn't know that. You didn't, did you? No. I did. So you can use me as a resource. But how can you start to find out what your faculty has done, what experiences that they've had, where they've lived, where they've vacationed, anything that can start to help you bring those perspectives right into your classroom without ever leaving your school. We have had great teachers work with us who have created whole speaker series with their faculty that they've hosted at their public library, and they've invited the whole community to come. So it doesn't just have to be limited to your school, but how can you get your whole community talking about global education? It's very hard to move this initiative forward if your community's not on board. So the more that you can engage your community in the world, parents, everyone, the more people are going to start to see it as an integral part of their children's education. So starting with your faculty, I think, is a great one. Moving to your parents, too, thinking about what parents are in your community and how they can bring in different perspectives is another great way. Okay, building a relationship with another country. So most times when I talk to teachers about this, they say, well, I've never really been to parts of the world where I'd like to set up a partnership. How do I do it? Can you connect me with a school in another part of the world? And what I always say is that there are tons of organizations out there that are already connecting teachers every day, connecting students every day. So this is not an exhaustive list, but I'm going to get you started. So one, I have to give a shout out to the Peace Corps because they actually have an incredible amount of resources online called Worldwise Schools. Has anyone used this in their classroom? A couple. So Worldwise Schools is a whole website dedicated to bringing the experience of different Peace Corps volunteers around the world into your classroom through video clips, audio clips. They have language podcasts. If you're a French teacher and you want to teach kids French that is spoken in Mali as opposed to French that's spoken in France, you can hear podcasts with the different accents and words that are used. There are lesson plans on teaching about culture, teaching about bridging cultural gaps, using experiences from around the world for your classroom, and it's extremely teacher friendly. They also have a program called the Correspondence Match. I participated in this as a teacher in the US and also as a Peace Corps volunteer in Moldova. They match you and your classroom up with a Peace Corps volunteer abroad for the length of their service, which is 2 years. So I was matched with a Peace Corps volunteer in Côte d'Ivoire until there was a coup, and then the coup shut down the correspondence match. But I'll tell you, that was about as real-world learning as it gets, okay? Because we were talking with our kids about why it was that our volunteer was being evacuated from their country and what was going on there and why it happened. And then we got reassigned to a teacher in Gabon, and we talked with that teacher and her students. Kids wrote letters, they emailed back and forth, but you can be set up and request, for example, that you be matched with a teacher who teaches English. So you can start to work with across language boundaries as well if you wanted to. They also have a speakers match program where they bring in people who are returned Peace Corps volunteers who are in your community. They'll give you a huge spreadsheet. I'm sure there are tons of them in the Chicago area. A spreadsheet of returned Peace Corps volunteers, where they served, and if they'd like to come in and speak to your classroom. Use those people. You don't have to know any of these people to do it. Just use the resources. ePals seems to be one that a lot of language teachers tend to know, but setting up e-partnerships with kids in other parts of the world. Global Nomads Group sets up video conferencing between kids and kids in different parts of the world around different global themes. They've started leaning more towards ongoing relationships over a period of a school year, where you might have your kids with 4 other classrooms in the United States and a classroom in Iraq, for example, that start talking about an issue of common significance. And all you need is a video conferencing technology, and they can help set that up. If you don't have the video conferencing technology, using Skype with one of these other tools, so let's say you match up with a Peace Corps volunteer and using Skype to do that, if you don't have it firewalled in your district, you can always petition to have that firewall removed and make that happen. Or you can do it at your local library, which is another way that we've gotten around that. IEARN, if you don't know IEARN, it's the International Education and Resource Network. They help foster collaborative relationships and projects between kids and kids around the world. They have an incredible setup to really match students with students in different parts of the world, teachers with teachers who are trying to teach a common issue and work collaboratively with classrooms in other parts of the world. So these are just a few ways to get started. There are endless organizations that help connect you with the world, but you don't have to have had those experiences yourself to make it happen. The next is get to know your foreign language teachers. So foreign language teachers, and I say this because I was one, we tend to live on the margins sometimes. Sometimes we're happily on the margins because we sort of like our little domain, but sometimes we feel marginalized in some way. But the language teacher actually has an automatic link to the world that is important to take advantage of and to build curricular connections with. So the more opportunities you can find to collaborate with your language teacher and help bring language to life through history, through culture, through global study, the more kids are really going to start to understand why they're even learning the language to begin with, which is oftentimes hard for kids to realize until they go abroad for the first time. Volunteering to lead a staff meeting. So this may or may not be an opportunity in your school district. If you do not have an opportunity to lead a staff meeting, invite yourself, because setting the tone for a staff meeting is one of your best opportunities. I have a great exercise that I'm going to do in my breakout this afternoon, but you're all welcome to it because it's linked off of my website. Helping people understand what global citizenship even is. Everyone has such a different idea of what that means. And when you get to the heart of what people really think global citizenship means, you start to unearth what people's assumptions are about global education. And I actually think it's a pretty rich way to engage your whole faculty in a discussion about how are we preparing students for the world? Are we doing a good enough job? If we're not, why not? Or take a hard look at your mission statement. I think every mission statement in every school has something related to preparing kids for the world. But interestingly enough, when it comes to putting it into practice, it's not always there. So getting your faculty to sort of take apart the mission statement and then align it with what's actually happening in your school is another great way to just very simply start the conversation. Using TED Talk clips, I'm sure all of you are familiar with TED Talks at this point, but the database grows by the minute. And now there are lots of really great ones that deal with global education and global citizenship. The one I love the most is The Danger of a Single Story. By Chimamanda Adichie. If you know that one, I could watch it forever. It's one of the best TED Talks out there. But sort of why it's a dangerous thing to only be presenting one perspective to kids. I link out to a couple of others that I recommend off of my website that are good starting points for faculty discussions. The CIS here has a lot of YouTube videos and resources that you can pull into your faculty meetings and use as a point of discussion. I always encourage whole faculty reads. Are there books that a lot of schools do this. You pick a book in the summer that the whole faculty reads, suggest the next one so that you can get people talking about global education. Global Achievement Gap is a little bit older, but still a very good one. Creating Innovators is Tony Wagner's new book. I'm reading that as part of an educator group right now. It's stimulating a lot of interesting conversation. That Used to Be Us by Tom Friedman and sort of the fate of the U.S. in the global context is another good one to start the conversation. But volunteering to start those conversations, I think, is a critical role that you can play. If you haven't had the opportunity to travel, summer travel is a great way to do it. And there are free ways and there are very expensive ways. I tend to opt for the free or cheaper ways, as I'm sure you probably do too. The Fulbright Hays program, who knows what the fate of it will be, but it's still going. These are longer experiences, usually 4 weeks long in a different part of the world. Has anyone done a Fulbright Hays? Oh, you got to apply. You got to apply for these. These are incredible, rich learning opportunities. They're courses abroad for 4 weeks with other teachers, and they arrange them by elementary, middle, and high school. So you'll be surrounded by colleagues of your same age group, which is a really rich way to experience the world. Volunteers for Peace, which is a Vermont-based nonprofit, you can go and volunteer on a project from anywhere for a week to 3 months. I taught in Morocco for 3 months as part of Volunteers for Peace because I wanted to learn about a different Francophone country. So that's one way you could do it. It's extremely cheap compared to some of these other global learning experiences. And don't worry about writing them all down because they're all on the website. See? So I see everyone sort of furiously writing. Another one is Earthwatch fellowships. So if you want to do a fellowship that's completely paid for, where you really do real science alongside scientists in the field, you don't have to be a science teacher to do it. In fact, they encourage teachers of all subjects to do it. They do Earthwatch fellowships in the summer, but also during the school year, where they actually help patch you through to your classroom of kids who are probably reluctantly sitting with your substitute teacher while you're doing really cool stuff in Costa Rica. And you can video conference with them, you can blog from the field, and engage your kids in the learning that you're doing from the field. And finally, Travelocity has a $5,000 grant called Travel for Good. It's especially good for people who have not had global service experiences before. In fact, they favor giving these grants to those people. to help you find an organization, and I give lots of suggestions on the website, where you would like to go do a global service project. And they usually, these organizations that are out there cost somewhere around $5,000. They're not cheap. So they offer these grants to help you do that. Another way is to connect with your community service club. So a lot of schools have community service clubs that, as wonderful as they are, typically are not connected to classroom learning very much. You might be doing a clothing drive or a canned food drive or some sort of raising money to give to a great cause, but it may not be that the kids ever have an opportunity to actually learn about where they're giving to in the classroom. So finding a way that you can create curriculum or lesson plans that directly link to what your community service club is doing is another way to kind of keep the conversation going and get kids to realize the real value and why they're doing service. If community service is something that's interesting to you, or service learning, I'm doing a little shameless plug, sorry, I'm doing a workshop on it later today. So if you'd like to come to the breakout on service learning, I'm going to be talking about ways you can set up meaningful service in a way that really is deeply connected to learning. The final idea, and this might be for, it's like the 2.0 people in the room, the people who feel like they're already sort of at the center and are looking to go a little bit further. A very popular thing in Massachusetts right now is to create school-wide global proficiency or global certificate programs. So there are a lot of high schools in the Boston area that are starting to sit down together with their faculties and identify what experiences, what learning opportunities, what things do we want kids to experience in order to be truly globally competent. And if these are the things that we want kids to experience, let's create a special designation on their high school transcript that says, stamp you're globally competent, right? It's a special designation on your transcript, but you have to identify what criteria do you want kids to be able to meet. Do you want them to have 4 years of foreign language study? Do you want every kid who participates in this program to have a global travel experience? Maybe you want everyone to have some sort of a service-based experience in their hometown that connects with the world. You can create any kind of criteria you want. And in fact, talk about discussion topic for your faculty meeting. Just figuring out what those criteria would be is one of the most exciting conversations, and you'd be amazed how many different paths those conversations can go down. A lot of people will create a performance portfolio, a performance assessment portfolio as part of that certificate program, where kids need to show the global connections and all of the learning that they do over their high school careers. I point to one off of my website, to Needham High School, which is a suburb of Boston, that was the first high school in Massachusetts to create one of these global competence programs. And you can kind of see how they set it up as one example. It's a very popular program now, and many kids are signing up for it as a way to sort of connect their learning with the real world. I would give you one caution. So here's my caution. Just like International Food and Festival Days were a thing about 15 years ago, and we thought, okay, yay, we're global now. We just did a festival. This has the risk of being that way too, okay? So having these global certificate programs, I think, is an incredible step to get your school to think about what does it even mean to give students a globally connected high school career, right? What does it mean to be prepared for living in the 21st century? What does it mean to be globally competent? Those conversations are critical, and they're so important. But it's very dangerous to say, all right, the kid has a stamp on their transcript, they're globally competent, I'm done, right? That's a very slippery slope. So if you go down the path of a global certificate program, I think do it carefully, with intention, and make sure that kids do not feel that just because they're accomplishing these criteria, that all of a sudden they're either better than their classmates or they are done with global learning. I think it's a very delicate balance. So I offer this idea with a word of caution, but I will say it's a way that schools have kind of systematically moved the global education conversation forward in their communities. And it has taken on like wildfire in our area. For some strange reason, every year I feel like there are more schools saying, we're starting a global competence program. And these certificate programs are cropping up left and right. Has this happened? Has this caught on over here? No. So look at this example and see, even if you don't do a global competence program, just setting up those conversations about what experiences do you want kids to have in order to be globally competent by the time that they finish school. That is really important. Some people say, well, they have to have language or they have to go abroad. Other people say they don't have to go abroad. They can have global experiences right here in Chicago. Why would they need to go abroad? How can we set up those opportunities for them? A lot of people who've traveled abroad with kids, you see this seismic shift that happens in their thinking and the sort of new way that they look at everything in their world. How can you create those experiences here at home or in your classroom? What would that look like? What would it take? Those conversations with your colleagues are already going to get you halfway to the center, okay? Because you're already thinking in a different way about what the role of global education should be in your curriculum. So these are just a few ways that you can start now. Start on Monday or Tuesday. I'm not going to give you a whole week, okay? So how are you going to start Monday or Tuesday to start to shift your thinking, crank up the dial, start to move global education to the center of your learning and teaching? And there's no doubt that a truly global education takes energy, it takes time, it takes creativity and collaboration with your colleagues. But I will say that you don't have to do a lot to start to shift global education more towards the center. It could take just tweaks to what you're already doing. There's a lot of incredible teaching that's already happening. So how can you start to talk with your colleagues, begin these conversations about what you're already doing well? Identify and celebrate those practices, but then push on. How do you move beyond that? What can you or your school do to ensure that global education doesn't just live on the periphery, but that it's a meaningful part of every core subject area? What changes do you need to make so that the world is not just something that's nice to learn about, but really becomes something that is difficult to learn about, something that is challenging and complex? Sometimes when we study about other cultures, we only stay in the realm of appreciation and celebration, right? Which is a very important thing to do, okay? It's important to appreciate all of the different cultural perspectives in your classroom, in your school. But imagine if you went abroad and the only time you ever learned about the United States was to celebrate Independence Day or sort of think about all the great things that we have to offer. It's wonderful, but it's one-dimensional. So our country, like every country in the world, is extremely complex, right? We're engaged in global negotiations on a daily basis that cause us to think critically and hard about who we are as a country, as a nation, as individuals, and as citizens. So how can you get kids to think in that complex way about all parts of the world and not just stay in the sort of surface level of appreciation and celebration? Moving from that celebration piece to a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the world means putting yourself outside of your comfort zone every day. And it's hard, but I'll tell you, it's the most invigorating teaching you can do. And so if you're looking to be stimulated again and sort of re-energized about the world, think about how you can push your curriculum further. Conferences like this one remind me why I love to teach. Surrounding yourself with 100 colleagues who care about this stuff is energizing. So as you sort of think about how you can take action in your schools and you think about the world outside of your doors being dynamic and evolving and culturally rich place to learn, I encourage you to indulge in a driveway moment, okay? I want you to stay in your driveway for the day. Think about everything you're learning today. Think about all the lessons you're getting, all the resources you're getting your hands on. Talk with your colleagues over lunch and indulge in this driveway moment, because the second that you go home, what happens, right? Your kids start pulling on your shirt, right? I want dinner. Everyone wants to sort of get your attention. This is your moment to kind of preserve and really dig into how you want to change your practice. So take the time today to make a plan for what you're going to do next week, how you're going to take this back this year, and good luck, because it's a wonderful journey, and I hope you enjoy your experience today. So thank you for having me.